Hey Reddit. My name is Thomas, I'm 20 years old, and I thought my family was normal. Then I took a DNA test. I don't know what I was expecting when I spit into that little tube. Maybe some cool ancestry facts. Maybe a distant cousin or two. What I wasn't expecting was to open my results and see the words. Close family half-sibling match. My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, willing the words to change. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe I was reading it wrong. But when I clicked on the match, my stomach dropped. Name: Alex T. Age: 30. Shared DNA: 50%, paternal side. I'm 20 years old. My parents have been together for 25 years. That meant Alex was older than me. That meant my dad had another kid before he and my mom ever had me. A kid nobody ever told me about. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the results, my mind running a mile a minute. Had my dad cheated? Did my mom know? Was this some deep family secret, or was my dad just as clueless as I was? At first, I convinced myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe my dad donated sperm in his 20s and never told us. Maybe Alex's mom used a donor and never told him. Maybe. But deep down, I already knew. This was real. I started digging. I clicked on Alex's profile, but it was mostly blank. No picture, no details, just a name and an option to connect. That was when I realized something terrifying. If I could see him, he could see me. I slammed my laptop shut, heart pounding. If Alex had logged in recently, he'd know about me too. Was he staring at his screen right now, wondering who the hell I was? Was he feeling the same mix of shock and confusion? I had no idea what to do with this information. Should I message him? Should I ask my parents? Should I just pretend I never saw it? For the next few days, I didn't say a word. I went to class, hung out with friends, acted normal. But the secret burned inside me. Every time I sat at the dinner table, I'd look at my dad, wondering how much he knew. If he was hiding something. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One night at dinner, my parents and I were eating takeout, talking about random things, when I decided to just rip off the Band-Aid. I put down my fork and, in the most casual voice I could manage, said, "Hey, did you guys know I have a half-brother?" Silence. My mom's fork clattered onto her plate. My dad just froze. He went completely pale. "Where did you hear that?" His voice was eerily calm, but his expression? Pure panic. I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward him. DNA test. My mom suddenly stood up and walked out of the room without saying a single word. My dad stayed seated, rubbing his face, looking like he just lost 10 years off his life. That was the moment I realized I wasn't supposed to know. My mom left the table like she'd just seen a ghost. My dad. He didn't move. He just sat there, staring at my phone like it was a bomb about to go off. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, he exhaled, rubbing his temples. "You shouldn't have done that test." I blinked. "Excuse me." "Wait, what?" I laughed, but it came out sharp. "I shouldn't have taken the test? That's what you're worried about." He sighed and leaned back in his chair. I didn't want this to come out like this. Come out. So, he knew. He freaking knew. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. My whole life, I thought my family was normal. A little boring, even. And now I had an unknown half-brother and a dad who apparently thought it was fine to keep that kind of thing a secret. So, are you going to tell me who Alex is, or do I need to track him down myself? My dad flinched at the name. Bingo. I watched as he ran a hand down his face, suddenly looking so much older than he had 5 minutes ago. His mom and we were together before I met your mother. I didn't know she was pregnant when we broke up. I found out years later, but by then, it was complicated. I narrowed my eyes. How complicated? He hesitated. Then, your mom doesn't want me to have contact with him. Oh, this was worse than I thought. She told me, back when we first got married, he continued, his voice low. She said we needed a fresh start. That bringing him into our lives would only make things messy. And I agreed. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. You agreed. You knew you had a son out there, and you just, what? Pretended he didn't exist. He winced. It wasn't like that. Really? Because it sounds like that. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My dad, the man who raised me, who taught me right from wrong, had a holeless child out there, and instead of stepping up, he just turned away? That's when I said it. The thing that would probably make people flame me in the comments. If you could abandon one kid, what makes you think you wouldn't do it again? His face dropped. I don't know why I said it, but I couldn't take it back. And maybe I didn't want to. Because in that moment, I wasn't sure if I even knew the man sitting across from me. I pushed back from the table. I need some air. And then I left him there, alone with his secrets. I stormed out of the house without a plan. My feet just carried me down the street, heart racing, thoughts tangled. I had so many questions, and none of them had answers I wanted to hear. My dad knew about Alex. He knew, and he just chose not to be a father to him. The man who raised me, who tucked me in at night, who gave me advice about life, who always said family comes first, had straight up abandoned his first kid. And I was supposed to just accept that. I ended up at a park a few blocks away, sitting on a bench, watching some little kid struggle to climb the jungle gym while his dad stood nearby, ready to catch him if he fell. That was what a dad was supposed to do, right? Be there. I pulled out my phone and stared at Alex's profile again. His name, his age, that DNA match that had shattered my whole reality. I hovered over the message button. Should I? Would it be selfish? Would it just make things worse? Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. A text from my dad. Please come home. We need to talk. I hesitated. I wasn't ready to go back. But I also wasn't ready to leave this alone. I took my time walking back. When I finally stepped inside, my mom was still nowhere to be seen. My dad was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an untouched glass of whiskey. I sat down across from him. Neither of us spoke at first. Then he said, I deserve that. I blinked. Deserve what? He let out a dry, humorless laugh. What you said before you left. I had almost forgotten my parting shot. If you could abandon one kid, what makes you think you wouldn't do it again? Hearing him acknowledge it almost made me feel bad. Almost. I don't know what you want me to say, I muttered. He sighed, rubbing his hands together. I was young. I was stupid. I didn't handle it the way I should have. That's it. I snapped. Oops, my bad. That's your excuse. His jaw tightened. I'm not excusing it. I live with it every damn day. I folded my arms. Do you? Because I've never heard you mention Alex. Not once. My dad went quiet. Then, after a long pause, he said something that completely wrecked me. You know, I still remember the first time I held you. I frowned. What? His eyes were distant, lost in some memory. When you were born, the second they put you in my arms, I knew I could never let you down. That I had to be better. I should have been touched. I should have felt something warm at that. But all I could think was, why didn't Alex get that? So, I asked. And Alex, did you ever hold him? The look on his face told me everything. No. My dad had never even held his first son. I sat back, disgusted. That's messed up. He exhaled slowly. I know. Does he even know about me? I pressed. I don't know. I clenched my jaw. So, he might have grown up thinking he was an only child? He nodded. It's possible. This just kept getting worse. I thought I had hit the limit of how angry I could be, but that set me off all over again. You're unbelievable, I said, shaking my head. You had 2 kids. You raised one and left the other in the dark. His face twisted. I did what I thought was best at the time. I scoffed. Best for who? Because it sure as hell wasn't best for Alex. He didn't have an answer for that. I stood up. I need time to think. Please, he said, voice softer now. Just don't do anything drastic. I knew what he meant. Don't contact Alex. I didn't respond. I just went to my room, shut the door, and stared at my phone again. The message button was still there. Still waiting. What do? I barely slept that night. I just lay there, staring at my phone, scrolling through Alex's profile over and over. At some point, I started overthinking. What if he already knew about me? What if he was just waiting for me to reach out? Or worse, what if he had no idea, and I was about to wreck his entire world? I must have stared at that message button for an hour before I finally did it. I typed out a simple message. Hey, I know this is random, but I just took a DNA test and I think we're related. My hands were shaking as I hit send. I half expected an instant reply. Nothing. I watched the little delivered checkmark appear. Then, silence. The next day, I went through the motions. Classes, lunch with friends, all that normal stuff. But my mind was glued to my phone. Every time it buzzed, my stomach flipped. But it was never him. By the time I got home, I was starting to regret sending the message. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I should have talked to my mom first, gotten more of the story. But then, a notification. Alex, who are you? My chest tightened. Okay, here we go. I took a breath and started typing. I think we're half siblings. Same dad. This time, he responded almost immediately. What's his name? I told him. And then, nothing. For a full hour. I was pacing my room, about to throw my phone across the room out of pure stress, when another message finally popped up. No way. I frowned. What did that mean? I don't believe you. Okay, not the reaction I was expecting. I typed back quickly. I have the DNA results. It says we share 50% of our DNA. That's impossible. I stared at my phone. Why was he acting like this? I don't know what to tell you, man. It's right there in the results. Another long pause. And my dad died when I was 5. What? I actually sat down, reading that over and over. My dad was very much alive. I had just argued with him less than 24 hours ago. My hands were sweating as I replied. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. He died in a car accident. My mom never remarried. My brain was short-circuiting. Either the DNA test was wrong, or someone somewhere had been lying for a long time. Alex, I don't think that man was your biological dad. I watched the little typing bubble appear, then disappear, then appear again. Then he sent, meet me. I swear my heart stopped. In person. Yeah. Tomorrow. We need to talk. I hesitated for all of 1 second before replying. Okay. I barely made it through the next day. Every class blurred together. I couldn't focus, couldn't think about anything except what was coming. By the time I got to the coffee shop we agreed on, my hands were sweating so bad I had to wipe them on my jeans. What the hell was I about to walk into? I scanned the room. A few people sat at tables, buried in laptops or scrolling through their phones. And then, in the corner, I saw him. Alex. I knew it was him the second I saw him. And not just because he was the only guy sitting alone, looking just as nervous as I felt. He looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough. Same eyes. Same jawline. Same way of tapping his fingers on the table like he was always a little impatient. It was like staring at some alternate reality version of myself, one who had grown up in a completely different life. I swallowed hard and walked over. Alex. He looked up, and for a second, we just stared at each other. Then he nodded. Yeah. I sat down. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then, without any hesitation, he said, I need to see the results. Straight to the point. I respected that. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and slid it across the table. He took it, staring at the screen. I watched as his expression shifted. His jaw tightened, his grip on my phone firmed. He exhaled through his nose like he was trying to keep himself calm. Then he looked at me. This is real. I nodded. Yeah, it's real. Alex sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. Jesus Christ. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. Finally, he let out a sharp laugh. You know what's funny? I almost didn't take the damn test. My girlfriend got it for me as a birthday gift last year, but I never sent it in. I finally did it last month just for fun. I blinked. Wait. Last month? He nodded. Which meant he had seen the results before I messaged him. I leaned forward. Alex, did you already know? His eyes met mine, something dark flickering behind them. Then he said, I didn't want to believe it. The air between us turned heavy. I cleared my throat. Look, I don't know what your mom told you about your dad, but she wouldn't lie, he snapped, a little too fast. Then, after a pause, at least, I don't think she would. I hesitated. Then how do you explain this? I gestured to the DNA results still on my phone. He clenched his jaw. I don't know. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The noise of the coffee shop buzzed around us, but it felt like we were in our own little bubble, both of us trying to redefine reality in real time. Then Alex exhaled. So, tell me about him. I knew who he meant. I sat back, thinking. How do you describe your dad to someone who was supposed to have the same dad, but never got the chance? I could have said a lot of things. I could have told him about the way our dad always made dumb dad jokes, or how he taught me how to ride a bike, or how he made pancakes every Sunday morning. Instead, I just said he's complicated. Alex snorted. Yeah. No shit. I hesitated. Then I asked the question I had been dying to know. Are you going to tell your mom? Alex tensed. I don't know. His fingers tapped anxiously on the table again, same rhythm as mine. Then, before I could respond, he looked me dead in the eye and said something that sent a chill down my spine. What if she already knows? I stared at him. You think she's been lying to you? Alex shrugged, but I could see it in his face. He wasn't sure anymore. And that scared the hell out of me. Alex sat across from me, stirring his coffee without drinking it. His words hung between us like smoke. What if she already knows? I swallowed. Do you really think she would lie to you about something this big? He let out a sharp laugh. I don't know what to think anymore. I didn't push him. Instead, I let the silence settle. He needed time to process, just like I had. But after a minute, he ran a hand through his hair and exhaled hard. I have to ask her. My stomach clenched. Are you sure? He nodded, jaw tight. Yeah. I can't just sit on this. I need to know the truth. I hesitated. Do you want me to be there? Alex thought about it. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. Yeah, he said. I think I do. That night, Alex texted me. Alex, she's home tomorrow night. Can you meet me at my place? Me, yeah. What time? Alex. 7. I stared at my phone. This was really happening. I was about to meet his mother, the woman who had either been lied to for 30 years or had been lying to her son for just as long. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day, I pulled up to Alex's place just before 7. He lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind with neatly trimmed lawns and driveways full of SUVs. It felt weirdly normal. Alex met me outside. He looked tense. She just got home, he said. I nodded, heart pounding. Okay. We walked inside. The house was cozy, decorated with warm colors and framed family photos. I saw one of Alex as a kid on a beach, holding a plastic shovel, his mother beside him. The man standing behind them, the one I assumed was his dad, looked nothing like him. That man was not our father. Alex's mom was in the kitchen, setting a plate in the sink. She turned when we walked in, smiling. Hey, sweetie, she said, then paused when she saw me. Her expression flickered, confusion, maybe even recognition, but she masked it quickly. Who's this? She asked. Alex cleared his throat. Mom, this is my name. She smiled politely. Nice to meet you. I nodded. You too. Then, without warning, Alex blurted out, I took a DNA test. His mom froze. For a split second, her face did something. Some tiny flicker of emotion, so fast I almost missed it. Then she let out a nervous laugh. Okay, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. Alex's hands curled into fists. I matched with someone. His mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Alex took a shaky breath. Mom, I matched with a half-sibling. The silence in the room was deafening. His mom didn't look surprised. Not even a little bit. Alex let out a breathy, disbelieving laugh. Oh my God. You knew. She swallowed. Alex. You knew, he repeated, voice rising. You knew. Her face crumpled. She turned away, gripping the counter like she needed to steady herself. It's not what you think. Alex's voice cracked. Then what is it? She was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, she turned back to us. And said something that made my entire world tilt on its axis. Your father isn't who you think he is. I actually felt my knees go weak. Alex looked like she had just slapped him. What? She took a deep breath, her hands shaking. The man who raised you, the man you called Dad, he wasn't your biological father. Alex staggered backward. His face went pale, eyes wide. No, he whispered. That's not, no. Tears welled up in his mother's eyes. I'm sorry. Alex was breathing hard now, like the walls were closing in on him. Why didn't you tell me? She wiped at her eyes. Because it didn't matter. He was your dad in every way that counted. Alex let out a strangled laugh. In every way except the most important one. His mom looked at me then, really looked at me. And I swear to God, it was like she was seeing a ghost. You look like him, she whispered. I swallowed. Like who? She didn't blink. Your father. My heart stopped. This woman, this complete stranger, had known my dad. Not just known him. She had been with him. I glanced at Alex, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the floor, shaking, his entire world collapsing around him. And all I could think was, what else is she hiding? Alex wasn't saying anything. He was just staring at the floor, breathing fast, his whole body rigid like he was barely holding himself together. His mom had just admitted it. The man he had called Dad, his whole life wasn't actually his biological father. I felt like I was intruding on something deeply personal, but at the same time, this was my secret too. My dad had been involved in all of this. He was the missing piece. I cleared my throat, trying to keep my voice steady. How do you know my father? Alex's mom's eyes flicked to mine again, still wide with something between shock and regret. She hesitated. Then she pulled out a chair and sank into it, pressing her fingers against her temple like she had the worst headache of her life. I was in love with him once, she admitted, her voice quiet. Alex's breath hitched. I felt my stomach churn. I knew where this was going, but hearing her say it out loud still felt unreal. You and my dad, I said. You were together? She nodded. We were young. It was serious. Or at least, I thought it was. Alex's fists clenched. So what happened? She let out a slow, shaky breath. I got pregnant. Boom. There it was. The confirmation. Alex wasn't just my half-brother in name. He was my dad's son. Our dad's son. I saw something flicker in Alex's expression. Relief? No, not relief. Fury. He turned to his mother, his voice shaking. You mean to tell me, my whole life, you let me believe my dad died when I was 5? Tears welled up in her eyes. I had my reasons. Alex laughed. A sharp, bitter laugh. Yeah. Name one. She wiped her face. Because he left, Alex. He left us. He left me. And I wasn't going to let you grow up waiting for someone who was never going to come back. The room felt suffocating. I could barely breathe, let alone process everything she was saying. Alex was shaking. So you just made up some guy? A dead man. and let me grieve for someone who never even existed. She let out a choked sob. I did what I thought was best. Alex stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. No. No, you don't get to say that. You don't get to decide what's best when you're lying to me for 30 goddamn years. I had never seen someone look so completely betrayed. His mom was crying openly now. Alex, please. But he was already walking out. I hesitated for half a second before following him. Outside, Alex was pacing in his driveway, his hands on his head, muttering to himself. I approached carefully. Alex. He spun around, eyes wild. Did you know? Did you have any clue? I shook my head. I swear I found out when you did. His breath was ragged, like he was fighting off a full meltdown. Dude, I don't even know who I am right now. I didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone who just found out their entire life was built on a lie? After a long silence, he looked at me again. His face was twisted with something dark, something I couldn't quite place. He left me, he said quietly. Our dad. He knew about me and he just walked away. I bit my lip. Yeah. He nodded slowly, like he was accepting something in real time. Then he looked me dead in the eye and said, I want to talk to him. I froze. Alex's voice was eerily calm. Too calm. I want to hear it from him. I want to look him in the face and ask him why he abandoned me. My pulse spiked. Was this a good idea? My dad hadn't even wanted me to bring it up. If he found out I had gone behind his back and brought Alex straight to him. But looking at my brother, because yeah, at this point, I couldn't deny it. He was my brother, I knew he wasn't going to let this go. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted him to. I took a deep breath. Okay. Alex's jaw tightened. Okay. I nodded. Let's go talk to our dad. I swear, the entire drive to my house felt like a countdown to an explosion. Alex sat in the passenger seat, jaw tight, eyes locked on the road ahead. He hadn't spoken much since we left his place, but I could feel the tension rolling off of him in waves. I was nervous as hell. Not just because I had no idea how my dad would react, but because a small, selfish part of me wondered, was I making a mistake? I had always seen my dad as a good man. A flawed man, sure, but a father who had always been there for me. Now, I was about to throw 30 years of secrets in his face. And I had no idea what that would do to him. Or to our family. When we pulled into the driveway, my hands were sweating. Alex didn't move right away. He just stared at my house, breathing heavily. You ready? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. No, his voice was flat. But let's do it anyway. We got out of the car. I could hear my own heartbeat as I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. My dad was in the living room, watching TV, completely oblivious to the fact that his entire past was about to come knocking. Hey, kiddo, he started, then stopped cold when he saw Alex step in behind me. The blood drained from his face. He knew. I didn't have to say a word. He looked at Alex, then at me, then back at Alex. His throat bobbed. Alex. Alex's eyes darkened. So you do remember me. My dad sat forward, rubbing his hands together like he needed to physically brace himself. No, Alex snapped. No bullshit. No excuses. Just tell me why. My dad shut his eyes for a long second, then exhaled. Why what? Alex's face twisted. Why did you leave me? The words hit like a gunshot. My dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I watched his face shift. Guilt, regret, maybe even shame. But no denial. You knew about me, Alex pressed. You knew and you just… What? Pretended I didn't exist? Started a new family and left me behind. His voice cracked on the last part, and that was when I realized he had spent his entire life carrying this question. My dad looked broken. Alex, I didn't know about you at first. Alex let out a bitter laugh. That's funny, because Mom said you did. She didn't tell me until years later, my dad admitted, his voice heavy. By then, she had already married someone else. She told me you had a father. That I wasn't needed. Alex flinched. I held my breath, watching him process that. But you were still my father, Alex said, quieter now. My dad nodded slowly. Yeah, I was. Then why didn't you fight for me? Silence. The question hung in the air. My dad looked away, his fingers tightening into a fist. Because I was scared. Alex's lips parted slightly. Scared. My dad swallowed. I had just married Mom's name. We were starting a life together. And suddenly, I had a son I never knew about. A son whose mother didn't want me in the picture. I could see the pain on his face. I told myself it was for the best. That you were happy. That I wouldn't be taking you away from the family you already had. Alex was shaking his head before he even finished. That's bullshit. My dad winced. You didn't reach out because it was for the best. You didn't reach out because it was easier for you. My dad's silence said everything. Alex clenched his jaw. His hands were trembling. I could tell he wanted to scream, to hit something, to just let it all out. But instead, he just let out a sharp, shaky breath and stepped back. That's all I needed to know, he said quietly. I blinked. Alex. But he was already walking toward the door. I turned to my dad, who looked wrecked. His eyes were red, his face tired. But he didn't move. He didn't call after Alex. And that told me everything I needed to know. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You could have fought for him. My dad's gaze lifted to meet mine. I know. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. My dad was not the man I thought he was. And maybe he never had been. I caught up to Alex in the driveway. He was standing by his car, his hands gripping the roof like he needed something to hold on to. Alex, I said cautiously. He didn't look at me. I don't know what I expected. I stayed quiet. Alex let out a bitter laugh. Maybe I thought he'd cry. Maybe I thought he'd beg me to forgive him. Hell, maybe I just wanted him to get on his knees and admit he was a piece of shit. I swallowed. I'm sorry. He turned to me then, his eyes sharp. Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything. I hesitated. Hadn't I? I was his son. The son my dad had chosen. The son he had been there for while Alex grew up believing in a fake father, a dead man who never existed. I had everything Alex should have had. And honestly, I didn't know how to deal with that. Alex ran a hand down his face. This was a mistake. I frowned. What? Meeting him, he said, shaking his head. Coming here. Thinking he'd have some grand excuse that would make it all okay. His voice was raw. He's a coward. And he always will be. I exhaled. What now? Alex scoffed. What now? Now I go home. I pretend this never happened. I forget I ever had a father. Because let's be real, I never did. That last part hit hard. I could see it in his face. He was done. There was no coming back from this for him. He opened his car door and paused. Then, without looking at me, he said, "You're lucky, you know." I blinked. What? He finally looked at me, his eyes tired. You got a dad. I didn't. Before I could even process that, he got in the car, slammed the door, and drove off. And just like that, he was gone. I went back inside. My dad was still in the living room, staring at nothing. The TV was still on, but he wasn't watching it. I stood there for a long moment, unsure if I even wanted to talk to him. Finally, he sighed and said, I never wanted this to happen. I let out a hollow laugh. Yeah, no shit. His shoulders sagged. He looked so much older than he had yesterday. I don't expect you to understand, he said quietly. But I loved your mother. I loved the life we built together. And I was afraid. Afraid that bringing Alex into it would ruin everything. I crossed my arms. So you just ignored him? He closed his eyes. I thought I was doing the right thing. That was what he kept saying. The right thing. I shook my head. The right thing for who? Because it sure as hell wasn't for Alex. My dad flinched. You weren't protecting anyone, I said. You were protecting yourself. He didn't deny it. And that's when I realized this conversation was pointless. My dad wasn't going to change. He wasn't going to have some big epiphany. He wasn't going to suddenly decide to make things right. Alex was right. He was a coward. And I was done making excuses for him. I turned to leave, but before I reached the stairs, my dad spoke again. "Do you hate me?" I stopped. Did I? I stood there, staring at the floor, trying to figure out what I felt. Finally, I just said, "I don't know." Then I walked away. For the next few days, I felt like I was walking around in someone else's life. Nothing felt real. My dad tried to act normal, but I couldn't look at him the same way. Every time he spoke, all I could hear was his silence, the decades of things he never said, the choices he made that he never owned up to. And Alex was gone. I texted him. Me, "Hey, just checking in." No response. Me, "I know you're probably done with all this, but I just wanted to say I'm here if you need me." Still nothing. And honestly, I didn't blame him. He had spent his entire life living in a lie. The one person who should have fought for him, our dad, had walked away without a fight. And I was just collateral damage. I wanted to reach out again, but some part of me was afraid I was forcing something that wasn't mine to force. I had spent 20 years thinking I was an only child. Alex had spent 30 years thinking he had a dad who loved him, only to find out that man never even existed. How do you even begin to move on from that? A week passed. Then 2. I stopped texting. I figured that was it. Alex was done. He wanted to forget everything, and I had no right to drag him back into it. But then, one night, my phone buzzed. Alex. I actually stared at the screen for a second, half convinced I was imagining it. Then I opened the message. "Alex, I'm still mad. I don't know if I'll ever not be mad." I hesitated before replying. Me, "I get it. Alex, I don't know if I want a brother. I don't know if I want anything to do with this family." I swallowed. Me, "That's up to you. No pressure." I sat there, staring at my phone, wondering if he was going to disappear again. Then, finally, he sent one last message. "Alex, but if I ever do, I'll let you know." It wasn't much. It wasn't a promise. But it was something. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. I don't know what happens next. Maybe Alex and I will grow close. Maybe he'll never text me again. Maybe I'll never fully forgive my dad. But I do know this. Secrets don't stay buried forever. And when they finally come out, you have to decide if you're going to let them break you, or if you're going to build something new. What would you do? Would you keep trying with Alex? Or let him go? Let me know. That's it for today's story. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more wild Reddit stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep the stories coming.